Yo, my name's Ricky Hyppa.
And I'm Griffin Conway.
We are Buzz directors. Or critics, right? One of the two. Buzz directors, critics, we don't even know what we're doing here, but...
So, as Buzz critics, everyone on the internet has 2 cents. There are 2 of us, so that's 4 cents. So we'd like to assume that that's more than anyone else. Today the topic is the Evil Dead Remake. Coming out April 5th. Just premiered at South by Southwest. We're going to talk a little bit about what it could be. We're going to talk about horror movies in general and what horror movies have become. Ricky, over to you. Starting off, what's your favorite horror movie?
My favorite horror movie? That's a very good question, Griff, because horror is a genre that's very near and dear to my heart. I love The Shining, I love Night of the Living Dead, I love George Romero's Dead trilogy, I love the 28 Days, franchise. They're not zombie movies. I'm a big zombie fan. Vampires, not so much. The original Blade movie was the one standout vampire movie that I deeply enjoyed. But to get back to the topic of what we were going to originally talk about, Evil Dead, it's definitely in my top 20. Recently just seen it for the first time a few years ago, and it's one of those movies that it's old and you see it, and then with a few repeated viewings of it, you get to appreciate, everything about it. Because if you just watch it once, not thinking anything, or if you go into it with high expectations, watching it once, you're probably not going to enjoy it too much. But if you just watch it with no anticipation for anything, then you're going to be very, very pleasantly surprised, because Bruce Campbell made his, arguably his debut. I know he made a few movies before that, but this was his breakout role and what made him almost a household name. I mean, in terms of B movies, he's, very much up there.
It was the first thing he ever did.
No, he made some movies beforehand.
He made Within the Woods, which was a 30-minute short that they did to finance Evil Dead. As far as the research I've done shows, Bruce Campbell's first thing was Evil Dead.
But one thing that I wanted to mention to Griffin that I read on the internet, which is always, a dangerous thing to say these days, because, you really, everything that they post on the internet, if it's posted on the internet, then it's definitely true. Okay? It has to be. There's a rumor...
We're looking at you here, Reddit. We're looking at you.
There's a rumor that Sam Raimi is also producing or creating a 4th Evil Dead movie with Bruce Campbell in it.
Not Evil Dead 4, but indeed Army of Darkness 2.
Okay, well, a follow-up to Army of Darkness.
Right. But that's for future speculation.
Yes.
I've heard a little blurb about that. I don't know much about it. The blurb was quick. It just said Sam Raimi was discussing it, and that idea ran through his mind.
What I would love is if this new remake, this reboot, whatever you want to call it, starts a new series off, if by the 2nd or the 3rd movie, I think it'd be really cool if they crossed them over. So,
what are you looking for in a horror movie? What are you looking for when you go see Evil Dead?
Well, when I go to see a horror movie, I want to get the shit scared out of me. I want to just feel terrified, like when I first saw The Exorcist, when they brought it back into movie theaters a few years ago, and they added in, the little DVD extra clips in there. That movie scared the living shit out of me. I mean, I was probably 12 or 13, but, if you're a 30-plus-year-old movie and you can scare me when I'm a teenager, then, that's something that is really, really difficult to do. Where I expect in the new Evil Dead movies, I just want to see some really realistic-looking blood, guts, and gore, and I want there to be, obviously some kind of a Bruce Campbell-esque character. Obviously it's going to be a girl, so it's going to be a little bit different, which is great, because I don't want them to just have some dude that, acts exactly like Bruce Campbell, or tries to act like Bruce Campbell,
Right.
I want there to be still that same character, but with a fresh new twist on it, because that's what so many remakes fail to do. But that's what I really want to see is, gore, guts, and some good action.
You know what surprised me about this? 2 things that I think why the remake is going to be genius. One, they're releasing it on April 5th. April, the middle of spring. Not in winter, not in fall, when they're going to have a bunch of other horror movies and scary movies to compete with.
Mm-hmm.
The second, unlike movies like Mama and My Soul to Take, My Soul to Take, Drag Me to Hell, this movie is rated R. something a lot of horror movies aren't rated anymore. Signs was PG-13, The Grudge and The Ring were PG-13. This is rated R, and I really appreciate that. I think it's good that a horror movie, something that is designed to play on primal fear, is actually got an R rating.
Oh, for sure. There's
But you know we've already sparked 2 arguments in the debates. You're going to have a sea of people in the comment section saying The Exorcist wasn't scary, you're a pussy, and you're going to have another group defending you who are telling the first group of people they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
And I just sparked a debate because people are not going to talk about rating systems. So there you go, YouTube and Reddit, something to grip onto.
And one thing that we'll ask is that, when you listen to us or if you listen to anyone else, don't take it personal. If you don't like what we're saying, that's fine. If you disagree with us, that's beautiful. Tell us what you think. We love, user feedback. But don't take it personal. If I say something like, oh, I think, The Dark Knight was a terrible, trilogy of Batman movies. That's my opinion. You calling me an idiot for it, is not going to make me think, oh, well, you know what? I'm an idiot. They actually are. It's great. So don't take it personal. Just be constructive. You know what I mean? But as he mentioned earlier, I don't think a movie is a horror movie unless it is rated R. And the same thing goes with action. Because not action to a lesser extent, but we'll get on that along more further into that in further
with the
episodes.
Expendables 3, we'll talk about action movies.
Yes.
So, horror. The things that go bump in the night.
Yes.
The things that made little kids cry and stay awake. Why? What has happened to our beloved horror genre? I'm an avid fan of horror. I know you are too.
Of course.
What has happened? When did we get stuck with these new weird horror movies? They're not scary. The Strangers, the Texas Chainsaw remakes, Jeepers Creepers. Where did these come from?
Or the Dawn of the Dead remake. Although I did enjoy it, it's more of an action movie for me than a horror movie.
These aren't horror movies. These are movies that rely on gore.
Which I'm all for. I'm all for gore, but it has to be within good taste and good reason. When I say good taste, I'm not saying that, if I see a brain, I'm going to freak out. The worse you do the gore, the better, but you can't rely on that. The person that is getting his intestines torn out has to be important, has to have plot, has to have good character development driven behind it. Otherwise, we just won't care.
So why? Why isn't Hollywood... Why? What happened to our horror movies?
Well, I think what the reason is, Griffin, is the fact that a rated R movie makes a lot of money, but you block out a large section of the box office by having it R.
But that's about ratings. I'm talking about just a good horror movie.
Right.
A lot of people have seen The Exorcist and are going to say it's not scary.
Right.
Those same people watch Paranormal Activity and jump out of their seats.
True.
Where did horror go wrong?
Although I will say I did enjoy Paranormal, the first one. When it came out, I thought it was a brilliantly done movie. They did the whole, shaky camera thing, but it wasn't really scary to me. It was kind of creepy, but I just thought it was a very original way. It's not really original because the whole shaky camera thing, but just the way it was done was very well done, and I really enjoyed the directing, and I liked the ending, although I think I saw the non-theatrical ending, but I enjoyed that one better because I saw both scenes. And then, because it made a lot of money, and this is what I was going with the PG-13 rating, is studios these days, it seems like they just want to make money. They don't care about the product. They think that, well, if we put out an excellent product with high quality, it'll make $100. Why would we do that when we can make something that, is decent and make $10,000?
That's okay, but to battle that argument...
I think that's why they do it.
First off, I hated Paranormal Activity. I wasn't impressed. I didn't like the fourth kind either.
No, me fucking I hate that.
So it comes down to, if we're talking about, Hollywood has always wanted to make money.
Oh, yeah.
Hollywood has always been about making money.
Mm-hmm.
It came down to Halloween, made money. Nightmare on Elm Street, made money. Friday the 13th, made money. Child's Play, and if you don't know what Child's Play is, it's the movie that Chucky was in. Child's Play 1 and 2.
I fucking hate those movies, I'm sorry.
I had to clarify, because a lot of people are like, what's Child's Play? It was called Child's Play. Hollywood has always been about horror. It's always been about making money. It's always been about, this is a scary movie, it's going to sell. Mm-hmm. So don't give me that excuse that, we need to change gears. Because they're not changing gears to make money in a good way. It's the directors, the producers, the writers. Where have the good horror writers gone? How come we've stopped seeing good horror movies? International horror movies are great. And I don't mean the crappy Japanese horror movies that 80% of our American horror movies are taken from. And before you're asking what movies, I'm talking about The Ring, The Grudge, Stay Alive, One Missed Call, because those are all Japanese remakes that came out years ago in Japan that we're now just getting. Why? Because I don't know why.
I did enjoy the first Ring movie, I will admit.
I didn't. Again, I was disappointed. But and maybe this is just me, but it seems that all new horror movies have taken this weird turn where they have to have... It's something to do with the film, where they make it look a little bit grainy, a little bit gothic in their sense. Even if it's like daylight scenes, it still seems dusk. And a good example of that kind of filmography is...
The Ring kind of did that.
Well, more along the lines of...
it's just the filter that they use.
Was it Alone in the Dark? I think did that. And then Dark Skies looks like it does that from the trailer.
I kind of want to check that out.
Aliens don't bother me. And that one doesn't look impressive. It looks like a third-person version of The Fourth Kind.
Oh, I hate it. See,
it looks like
one of my fears is aliens, and I went into The Fourth Kind thinking, cool, this is a alien movie, it's going to scare the shit out of me. No, like, I'm sorry. Like, the whole, I mean, I get what they're trying to do with the whole, okay, let's convince, because what I've noticed with that movie and what they tried to do with the Blair Witch did so wonderful is that convincing the public that everything is based on a true story. And in real life, most of the time when they say that in a horror movie, it's incorrect. Or it's just completely fabricated.
Well, the woman it was based around, she was a researcher in sleep therapy. Mm-hmm. That's about as far as the truth goes in that movie.
Right.
When they say based off true events, a section of it's true.
Yeah.
The rest...
A good example would be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Everyone, they always say, like, oh, it's based on a true story. It is, but the serial killer that it's based off of is more accurately portrayed in Silence of the Lambs. Because they were trying to go for an Ed Gein kind of killer. And Ed Gein...
Good name drop.
Ed Gein did, in fact, cut off faces and put them on his face, similar to how Leatherface does.
He also made lampshades.
He didn't have a chainsaw.
He also made lampshades.
And lampshades.
It's also the person Psycho was based off of. Yeah, Ed Gein was one of America's first big serial killers, and a lot of earlier horror movies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s took that, and they kind of molded it. But I know tons of people who saw the Texas Chainsaw remake, and it has the police footage. I know tons of people who believe that happened. They're like, oh, that's real. Here's the thing, folks. When you ever see a movie that has police footage, like in Cloverfield, here's the thing. The police, the government, whatever agency is holding onto that footage doesn't let it go. It doesn't leak into the public.
Yeah.
It's
like those alien autopsy videos that you see.
Those don't get leaked. The people who are leaking them aren't leaking them, because if they did, they'd be taken away and shoved in a little hole on the earth somewhere. No one would ever hear from them again.
Can you say NDAA Act of 2012?
No one's going to take that risk just to release a piece of footage that they're not going to get any acclaim for. So, no, what you saw in the Texas Chainsaw...
No, Julian Assange.
No, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre did not happen. No, The Strangers. Do you remember that movie? The reason why I keep going back to this is because I'm so angry at this movie. Strangers came out a few years ago. Liv Tyler was in it. That's
Steven Tyler's daughter.
She's not hot, and she can't act. But
I guess I'm alone here.
It was in this movie, and it was called The Strangers, and it was a great psychological horror movie. For the first 20 minutes, it was a great psychological horror. It was this girl and this guy on their wedding night at their house, and you could tell she wasn't really into it. She seemed kind of forced or pressured, but they still got married for whatever reason. And these three people start messing with them. It starts to get really psychologically disturbing. And about halfway into the movie, about half an hour into the movie, it snowballs into bad. You can tell what's coming. It's just a really cheap movie at that point. What happened to horror? When did horror decline? I mean, when was the last great horror movie? And I don't mean the last classic, because the last classic movie, debatable. You can either say it was Nightmare on Elm Street or Hellraiser, depending on what zone of horror you're talking about. But I mean the last really good horror movie.
That's a good question. I have to get back to you on that one.
I mean, they tried to bring back the slasher with Scream.
See, I think Scream was more of a satire than a horror movie.
But it was still based as horror.
No,
you don't
it
go
was.
find
Yeah,
Scream
yeah.
in the comedy section.
No, I mean, it wasn't. It was.
And you don't put
It's a horror comedy.
And you don't.
I'll say that.
I can appreciate horror comedy, but Scream had great potential.
Yeah, I didn't really like Scream.
Scream had great potential to resurrect horror. And it didn't.
No, Mr. Craven tried.
So
Or was Craven directed that one, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So at what point do horror fans retaliate? I mean, let's look at some great classic horror movies. You had Frankenstein. It's a great horror movie.
Thank God they haven't remade that yet. Thank God.
Well, now you put the thought out to the internet.
Don't remake it.
Here comes the remake. It's going to be handheld from the perspective of the monster. And it's going to be a dream within a dream. Frankenception.
Frankenception. Directed by Christopher Nolan.
Starring Morgan Freeman as all the roles.
If you would have said starring Christian Bale, all the roles, that would have been equally funny. But don't do it, Nolan. I know you won't.
So, it comes down to, Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, the werewolf,
For
the
sure.
Invisible Man, the Mummy,
They tried to do The Invisible Man, remember, with Kevin Bacon?
Hollow Man. Yeah, but it wasn't it was Hollow Man, not the Invisible Man. I get the concept, but
Same, that movie was a love letter,
so are you saying that as long as there's an invisible killer or as long as there's an invisible person in the movie, it's always
it was
Invisible Man?
it was a love letter to The Invisible Man, in much the same way, and I know I'm breaking the genre here, that Inner Space was a love letter to The Fantastic Voyage. And now that's just going way back.
Okay, I can see that.
The people, they
a good
love
name drop.
they love the original, and then they said, you know what, I'm going to take this concept and I'm going to make it my own.
It's a good name drop.
It's a really good cover.
Fantastic Voyage, it's good. And then you have, the great folklore horror movies that came out from England and Italy.
Like Dracula and shit?
Well, closer to like Blood on Satan's Claw, which I mentioned to you. I've talked to you about that in the past. Kind of a little bit Dracula, but you have these great Italian movies that came out. Black Sabbath was one, that's where the
That's
band
where
got
they got
their
their name, yeah. I know that
White
much.
Zombie
Because
was another one.
they jammed in a movie theater initially.
Yeah, and then So it comes down to the the 70s. They had The Omen, The Exorcist, Jaws. The 80s, you had Hellraiser, Child's Play, the Leprechaun series. But where
No, they haven't
Did
rebooted
horror-
Leprechaun, knock on wood.
even if they did, I wouldn't care. Leprechaun's been bad ever since its creation.
It is a pretty ridiculous
Leprechaun was a
concept.
bootleg Child's Play.
Yeah,
If you have a dwarf attacking people,
It was in no
it's
way-
either Chucky or the Leprechaun.
but I'll the one thing that because I would say both movies are just ridiculous concept. But if I had to choose between one or the other, definitely Leprechaun over Child's Play. I do not.
So
like
let me
Child's
ask you this:
Play.
Would you rather fight? Would you rather fight the Leprechaun, or would you rather deal with Chucky?
Of course, I'd rather deal with Chucky, and that's the reason why I don't like those movies because it's the stupidest concept I've ever heard of. It's a 2-foot doll. You stomp on it.
He's
Game
a
over.
leprechaun.
Well, I was talking about Child's Play.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's a leprechaun. What's the difference? It's still 2
Oh.
feet.
Well, but it's a leprechaun. It's got like powers and shit.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, just a 4-leaf clover. I'm sorry, a fucking plant. You could throw a
Happy St.
fern.
Patty's Day.
You could throw a fern at this thing and it would run away. It's a plant.
I would think that being that he's Irish, I could just negotiate and get some beer, and
A Blarney Stone.
maybe a
rub the
a
Blarney
corned
Stone.
beef sandwich. Like,
Rub the Blarney Stone. I'm surprised they haven't done a Banshee horror movie.
Banshee.
We have the Leprechaun. How come no Banshee?
Isn't a banshee like a snake?
No.
But see, when you say banshee, you're talking Halo language. I'm thinking little purple things you fly around. In
No,
Halo.
a banshee. It's a dead. It's a spirit of a dead woman. She was also a symbol for death in Irish folklore. She has like a huge whale that's not a whale like a whale. A whale
Yeah.
like a screech.
Yeah.
They never done a good banshee movie.
Have they made okay, you know how when you go in, I know they did part of this in one of the Paranormal Activity movies, but I think they should make a full-on horror movie, non-shaky camera. But when you were a kid and you went into the fucking bathroom and, if you fucking close your eyes and turned around and saying Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody
They've
Mary.
made Bloody Mary 4 or 5 times, and it's never been done good.
Well,
It's always been done. You can find Bloody Mary in that Netflix section of like shitty horror movies like Thanksgiving and fucking just those really bad B movies.
Oh, I love those movies.
You can find Bloody Mary like 3 times there.
I once watched a movie from that section entitled "The Creature That Challenged the World," and it was just this 1950s like C movie, if you will, like not B, but it goes beyond a B movie. It's a C movie, and it's just this giant worm from outer space.
Who challenged the world?
No, he challenges like a group of 4 or 5 sailors, and of course they end up killing him at the end. But
There's a great movie from the 50s called Them.
I thought you were going to say Plan 9 from Outer Space.
That's the worst movie of all time. Ed Wood.
Twilight is, actually.
Well, that's debatable. But there's a movie called Them that came out in the 50s. Have you ever seen Them? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Never.
I know the internet's clamoring right now because half the people know what I'm talking about. The other half have no clue. It's about 50-foot radioactive ants destroying this town.
Kind of like
and that's what it is. It's ants.
That reminds me
of... It's giant ants.
Okay, that reminds me of the movie Matinee with John
Never saw
Goodman.
it. Never saw Matinee.
Dude, Matinee. Okay, it's not a horror movie. We're getting off topic here, but I just have to tell you about it. Okay, so you got John Goodman. He owns a movie theater. It's the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he plants all these like weird little in-theater effects for the movie, and basically it's kind of like a commentary on America in the 1960s when we had the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's just the weirdest movie, one of those really weird offbeat B movies, but it's so, the nostalgia of it being of the time, it displays the time period very well, and anytime you got John Goodman in a movie,
right.
I mean, I have not seen...
No, he's going to deliver.
Never seen a movie where he has not been completely outstanding. And even if the script was terrible, he makes the movie watchable just from his acting.
There's a great John Goodman movie that Kevin Smith directed.
Haven't seen it yet.
It's called Red State. If you haven't seen Red State, watch it. It's by Kevin Smith. For those of you who don't know who Kevin Smith is, he has a show right now called Comic Book Men.
Who the fuck doesn't know who Kevin Smith is? If you don't know who Kevin Smith is, stop watching this video because we don't want you as fans.
Well... Now they're going to learn who Kevin Smith is.
Clerks, Jamestown and Bob Strike Back.
Dogma, Chasing Amy, Jersey Girl, Zack and Mary Make a Porno. But he has a great show on TV right now called Comic Book Men.
The only reason why I know about that show is because I've seen commercials.
I've seen every episode. I've seen every episode. It's great. It's hilarious. But he did this horror movie called Red State, and it is awesome. If you haven't seen Red State, watch it. It's on Netflix. Rent it, download it, buy it. Just check out Red State. It is one of the best horror movies I've seen in 5 years. And it's weird coming from Kevin Smith, but it is very intense. Michael Parks is in it, which is just intensity constantly. I'm not going to spoil it for those of you who haven't seen it, but for those of you who have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's what I want for horror movies. I want something that is real, but at the same time, it's almost sadistic enough that it plays on you. I mean, horror movies are supposed to play on your fear.
Yep.
Zombies. It's the dead. They can't die conventionally. They eat flesh. Vampires. They suck blood. Werewolves. They're men who turn into wolves that rip you to shreds. The Mummy. It's a dead thing that reanimates.
It's a zombie.
Mummies
are zombies.
Essentially. Yeah. Jaws.
Oh.
Giant shark in the water that killed people. That was based off a true event. It was a shark that made its way into a river system and it killed 5. They had to go kill it. It was adapted. Blah blah blah.
It's not a horror movie, but you probably didn't like the remake of The Mummy or The Mummy with Brendan Fraser.
No,
I do. I love that movie.
That's way off topic too.
I know, but you just said Mummy, so love The Mummy, the first one. I assumed you didn't like it.
No, because it led to Dwayne Johnson being on screen.
Okay, well, I'm
talking
about the first one.
You're talking about the franchise.
God, not this argument again.
The franchise is what you brought up.
And
it led to, you know what? Because of The Mummy, I had to sit through Fast and the Furious 5.
Okay, how about
That's what happened.
How about this? Before all those other shitty movies came out, when you saw The Mummy, did you enjoy it?
No.
At that point?
No.
Okay, cool. Because
I was expecting a horror movie.
Oh, you were?
And it's The Mummy. I didn't see the trailers or anything. I just heard of this movie called The Mummy. It was like a B-rate action movie. It was irritating.
It was definitely an action movie.
Almost as bad... It was almost as bad as the third Rambo movie.
Honestly, the only Rambo movie I've ever seen was the newer one.
We need to get back on track.
Yeah, anyway.
You mentioned the word B-movie. You've said it a couple of times in this. B-movie, B-movie. Evil Dead started out as a B movie.
Oh, hell yeah.
How do you feel about Evil Dead now going from a little cult following to what it is?
Well, you know what? I am freaking glad that it has, because you know what? There are some folks, and this transgresses a lot into, the punk rock music community, where you can't be successful if you're doing your thing and it's great and so a lot of people like it, and then you say, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do what I have to do so a broader audience can enjoy this. That I think is great. I think it's great that more people now are going to be they're going to go and they're going to see this new Evil Dead remake, and they're going to, whatever they think of it, if they like it, they're probably going to check out the original one if they haven't already seen it.
By the way, if you don't know, the Evil Dead, there's going to be a movie coming out April 5th called Evil Dead. That's not its own movie. That's a remake. And there's Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, and a movie called Army of Darkness. So don't think that this is just a movie that people have made now. This has been around for 35, 40 years. Continue.
40 years?
79.
That's when it came out, 79?
Well, that's when it was made, but it didn't actually hit until 81. But it was made in 79.
A long-ass time, we'll just say that.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think that the beautiful thing about remakes and, reboots and all of that is that even if it isn't that good, there's going to be some folks who go into that theater thinking, okay, this is just a new movie, and they're blown away by it, and they say, oh, they'll Google it on the internet to post a review on it or whatever, and they'll find out that, oh, this is actually a remake, or maybe they'll pay attention during the opening credits and they'll say based on, the screenplay by blah, blah, blah. And I think it's good that it's come to this point because, there's going to be a larger audience that is opening up to this wonderful movie, and I just think that's great. I say screw all the people like, oh, Sam Raimi's selling out by allowing other people to do
Steve-O, he didn't sell out. He bought in. He bought in, Steve-O.
Man.
So, what do you want from your horror movies? When you just watch a horror movie, what are some things you're looking for? What do you like to see? Monster? Do you like to see human versus monster, human versus human, human versus ghost? Well, what do you like from your horror movie? Human versus zombie, human versus alien, human versus catastrophic event?
Number one, I would say realism, because if you can make a horror movie realistic, that makes it 10 times, that magnifies the sheer terror that you can get from a movie. You can make the most unrealistic movie and try to make it terrifying, and for me, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's just some weird thing tearing the abdomen out of that.
So what about The Blob? The Blob's a classic horror movie, came out in the 50s.
Yes.
The Blob from space.
It was remade once. Thank God only
so
once.
The Thing was another remake that came from the 50s that started in the 80s and then was remade a third time, which I actually didn't mind the two remakes.
There was two?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the new one was it's a prequel to the John Carpenter one.
Is it? I didn't realize it was a prequel.
Yeah.
I thought Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character was supposed to be John McCready.
Nope, it's actually it's a prequel. I haven't seen it.
I've seen
little clips of it, and
I was pretty satisfied.
Well, and it looks cool, like by all means, and I'm willing to check out the whole movie. But again, the freaking CGI. Like, this is why I'm really excited about this new remake of The Evil Dead, because reviews are coming in, and from what the people who produced and created the movie are telling, from what I'm reading on the internet, again, that trustworthy internet, is that little to no CGI was used, and that's the one thing I think this new Evil Dead, if it fails in the story, if it fails in everything else, they have
the realism behind them.
Yes, exactly, realism, because CGI is beautiful for certain small things. It's great. But when you're George Lucas, I know I'm going off topic here, but this is just with CGI, and you get 4 or 5 people, you put them on the set, and the set is composed of this giant blue or green screen, and then you have like one thing like a chair that looks realistic, and you expect them to give a good performance. Like, of course, their acting is going to be wooden as hell. I mean, shit, even if you get someone that's as good as acting, say maybe Johnny Depp or Denzel Washington, to me, that's a challenge. I mean, I'm all for challenging actors, but if you want a good performance, stick to where the glue sticks.
But you didn't answer. You kind of answered my question, but really, what do you like? Human versus human, human versus monster, human versus nature, human versus alien.
Human versus...
What do you like in a horror movie? What do you like to see people fight against? Or what do you like to see hunt people down?
Well, I think human versus human is always going to be my favorite, just because...
So you're a huge fan of... You naturally glean to things like Friday the 13th, not Nightmare on Elm Street, because that's technically a dream demon.
Right.
But you'd like essentially Scream, Halloween, Nightmare or Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, I just like the human versus human element for not really so much horror movies. I mean,
I Know What You Did Last Summer.
that was a good,
I Know What You Did Last Summer. I like it.
But and I know it's not a horror movie, but I'll bring up a movie by the name of Enemy at the Gates for the human versus human conflict, because I like the idea of someone hunting someone down and you have to outsmart them, and you are against someone who is equal as you. Anytime there's a movie where there's some monster or alien, don't get me wrong, if they portray it convincingly, there's good character development behind the villain, then, cool, that's great, and that's why you go to a horror movie. You don't go to a horror movie to see necessarily.
So what about a no-win situation? Like something like The Exorcist, where they won temporarily, but you can't defeat Captain Howdy.
Right.
You can't defeat whatever that demon was, whether it was the devil, a spirit, just a random-ass demon, or Captain Howdy itself or whatever. You can't beat it. You can temporarily dismantle it, you can temporarily depart it, but you can't beat it. How do you... What do you feel about that? Something you can't beat.
Well, I think the only horror movie that I've ever seen that ended, for the most part, on a non-happy ending was The Ring. Any other horror movie I've ever seen, it's okay. Everything, by the end of the movie, the plot is resolved. I mean, maybe The Evil Dead, too, because, The Evil Dead at the end, it kind of...
Right.
That happens, but I'm not going to spoil it for the folks who haven't seen it. But The Ring, and I think that's why I appreciated The Ring, is because it's starting to end, and you think, okay, everything's good, the plot's resolved, and then, spoiler if you haven't seen The Ring, it ends up, the only reason why they survived is because she made a copy of the tape, and then that's why she forces her son to make a copy of the tape, which only further makes the, mayhem of this fucked up little kid spread, because, their lives are spared, so that is resolved, but there's going to be even more killing and more, suffering and despair, which is the one thing that I genuinely appreciate about The Ring, because I'm so tired of movies ending on a happy ending. Same thing with 500 Days of Summer, but that's a whole nother ball of wax, so we'll get on to another episode.
It just comes down to, I want something that, I like human versus human, I like human versus alien, I like human versus monster and ghost, but I don't want to see a movie that lets me down. I don't want a horror movie
nobody does.
No, but I don't want to, but a lot of people settle for disappointing horror movies. A lot of people will watch a modern horror movie, and they'll be like, oh man, that scared the shit out of me. Yeah, because you haven't watched enough horror movies. I'm sorry, they're not good. I want something that, even though you can't... So, let's get the phrase original out of this conversation. Because there's no such thing as original these days. Everything is a remake, everything is an idea.
Is original.
But it's not. Everything is a remake, everything's done before,
certainly.
Everything is taken from everything.
Certainly. Until someone comes up with a completely original idea that is unlike anything else. Have we seen it? No. That doesn't mean...
To some level, Inception could have been The Good Night.
The Good Night?
It's a movie about sleep depth and this guy lucid dreams.
I thought you were just doing a...
No. I'm saying it's... To some level, you could argue that Inception was a scaled-up version of The Good Night. Danny DeVito's in it, Martin Freeman is in it, Penelope Cruz is in it. It's all about sleep, lucid... It's all about lucid dreaming and getting caught up in your dreams and all that jazz. But...
Haven't seen Inception.
I just want a horror movie that throws a curveball. And I don't mean some shitty twist like M. Night Shyamalan, because if I see another one of his movies, I swear to God, my teeth are going to shatter and rupture half the planet.
How does he still have a job?
I don't know. He must have signed a deal with the devil.
Like, he is, the only director I've ever witnessed that is true to the musician term of one-hit wonder, I don't know how you feel about Sixth Sense, but I absolutely love the Sixth Sense.
Hated Sixth Sense, hated Unbreakable, hated Lady in the Water, hated The Village, hated fucking Devil, hated Signs.
Yeah, I didn't really like Signs too much.
Fuck M. Night Shyamalan. He needs to stop.
I'll agree that, like...
He's almost as bad as Boyle or whatever that dude's name is. I used to love Tim Burton. I used to root for Tim Burton.
He's lost his way, just like John Carpenter.
Well, here's the problem with Tim Burton. Tim Burton started out as the renegade director. He started out as the weird director who would do stuff that Hollywood wouldn't touch and that mass audiences wouldn't really go see. I remember when I was a kid, I saw Nightmare Before Christmas, and there was only 7 other people in the theater with me. Now, Tim Burton movies are selling out constantly. I'm Tim Burton.
You know why?
He needs to stop.
What he needs to do is he needs to just go ahead and just make a movie with Johnny Depp to revive his career, I think.
Yes, because that would certainly save him. And Johnny Depp's career.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that was a joke. You know, I'm sure you folks can understand our frustration with the fact that Johnny Depp, wonderful actor, Tim Burton, good director.
It's a shame that Johnny Depp, his acting gets downplayed by his characters.
Mm-hmm.
When people think Johnny Depp, they think of Jack Sparrow, Edward Scissorhands, the Mad Hatter, or Sweeney Todd.
I think first thing I think of is Hunter S. Thompson.
Hunter S. Thompson, I love.
Number
Okay,
one.
but that's biased for me because I'm a huge Hunter S. Thompson fan anyway. But he's done a ton of Benny and June. Whatever happened to Gilbert, or What Happened to Gilbert Grape?
Now he's going to be Indian in this new movie, apparently.
It's not a new movie. It's actually an old TV show that came from an old radio show called The Lone Ranger, and he's playing Tonto.
You know, Hollywood, if you're really running out of ideas, watch this blog and talk to us. We won't charge you.
Yeah, we can
do it
send
for free.
Put us on the payroll.
Hell, if I have some of my ideas be used for free, like,
But it comes down to
but I'll take a check too.
there needs to be a good director to throw us a curveball. And
Absolutely.
I feel like that's what this Evil Dead's going to do. I feel like it's going to be something fresh. Even though it's a remake, I feel like it's going to be something
still
that
have-
horror fans need.
It's great, though. The thing that's great about this remake is the fact that you still have Sam Raimi producing it. So, and although I will say that with the movie that was based on the video game Doom, you had the original, the people who came up with, you know, what's the game studio that made Doom? Whatever they're called, they did endorse the movie. And
I'm not a game aficionado.
obviously, if any of you've seen the Doom movie, I would say it's the absolute worst movie I've ever seen in my life. Hands down. Nothing... I mean, I'm not even that hardcore of a Doom fan, and my God, like, how are you going to make a movie about hell taking over a random, you know, space station on Mars and remove hell from the equation? How do you, like, no, I'm sorry, like...
Did you ever see a movie called Event Horizon?
I love Event Horizon.
Thank you. That
was the last good horror movie.
I'm
if
gonna
you
have
ask
to.
me.
I'm gonna have to agree. I'm gonna have to agree on
That
that.
movie was frightening to me as well.
That movie was fucking terrifying.
Yeah, you got
when
Sam
Neill,
Neill.
the eyes. When
Yeah.
I mean that's
Sam Neill playing a villain is something that
he needs to do it more.
needs to do a lot more. Yeah.
I mean, I love Sam Neill anyway. I think he's a great actor. I think he's phenomenally talented. But to see him go crazy, it's on the level of Jack Nicholson from The Shining, or Al
yeah.
Pacino from Insomnia.
And
It's on the level of where you really see him
Christopher Nolan
deteriorate.
directed that movie.
Did he?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Christopher Nolan's hit and miss for me when it comes to directing.
Oh, I've never seen.
You know who I
movies
want to
made
see
that.
as more of a villain in more movies?
Who?
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know the
Yeah.
internet's like, oh, Silence of the Lambs, Silence of the Lambs. Really, though, if you can find me a better villain aside from John Malkovich, who can really hammer home terror, it's Anthony Hopkins.
You know who I'll catch some heat from you for, I would say, is the one shining light in the villains of the movie Batman Forever, I would say, is Jim Carrey's portrayal of the Riddler. Because that was the problem with the Batman Forever is the fact that that's when that franchise started taking the turn towards being campy and like the 1960s television show. But the one redeeming factor of it was the fact that Jim Carrey's character had the lone sliver of dark, psychotic madness.
He did kind of slip, didn't he?
Yeah, no, that was the one sliver of dark grittiness that remained from the previous two movies. And I would say that with him being a
Edward
villain,
Nygma, right?
yeah,
It was Edward
and
Nygma.
and I'm not sure if you've seen the trailer for Kick-Ass 2, but he's supposed to be the antagonist in that movie. Did you like Kick-Ass?
I did like Kick-Ass, but that's for another
my
story.
God.
That's
Yeah,
another.
We're going off topic here.
We're going on topic.
We'll address that
So,
in another episode. but-
Evil Dead, horror movies. We both know what we like.
Yes.
Where do we go from here? I mean, as a horror fan in the next 10 years, where would you like to see your horror movies go to? Would you like to see them throw back to something from the 60s? Or do you want to take them to a place where we can't fathom yet? I mean, do you think that eventually movies like Cabin Fever and Saw will be considered the new classics?
Please, no. But what I would like to see is a lot more... Because my favorite thing with movies, cite Star Wars as an example, is when you get a movie that has maybe one or two people, familiar faces in it, and the rest of the cast is completely unknown, and of course they're good at acting. I want to see a lot more horror movies pulling that route. And in terms of the plot, I just want to see less remakes and reboots and more what I like to call love letters to the classic movies. And like I brought up earlier with the movie Fantastic Voyage and the movie Interspace. Fantastic Voyage is a movie that came out in the 1960s, and it was basically about the Soviets versus the Russians. Typical Cold War movie. They're fighting over miniaturization technology, and they end up injecting this little submarine full of 8 people, a whole team of people, inside this Russian scientist or the scientist or whatever to save him from dying. And the director of the movie...
There's a movie called Interspace with Dennis Quaid that is a love letter to Fantastic Voyage, and instead of taking the old boring concept of having Russian scientists shrunken down, it really takes the same concept, but it reworks it, and it remodels it and rescales it into something that can almost be a tribute to where it came from, to its roots.
Precisely, and the thing that I love about that concept is that there's people who are seeing movies now that they really like, and I'm sure they're also watching movies from, before horror movies lost their way. So what I want to see more with horror is I want people to watch movies like Frankenstein and Nightmare on Elm Street, or even contemporary ones that, me and Griffin might not necessarily like, but if they could take that concept, spin it, and make it a whole lot better, a lot more terrifying, they understand, what makes people tick when it comes to horror movies. I would love to see a lot more love letters than reboots. And I really think that although this Evil Dead movie is, in all technicality, a reboot/remake, I think that they're going to do what, when I say the term love letter, is best, in the sense that they take the concept of it, but they put their own spin on it far more than a typical remake or a reboot would. Because most of the time when you remake something and you have the same name attached to it, you go into that movie with certain expectations. Certainly like how we will when we go to see this new Evil Dead movie. We're both going to think, okay, well, where's the scene,
right.
Spoiler alert, where the trees, do that thing.
It's in there. The trailer shows it.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, they have it.
Oh, okay.
They kept it in.
You have to.
You have to.
See, and that's the thing about remakes, is the fact there's certain restrictions with it. There's
right.
certain things that you necessarily have to do. Now, when they made Interspace, there wasn't anything where like, okay, well, we have to include the part where he smacks the Russian scientist and says he's wrong. You don't have to do that. You can just you already have the concept that you're, being inspired
and
from.
By concept, we don't mean we want to see a movie not called Frankenstein and have it be someone create a living creature from electricity from reanimated human parts.
Right.
We don't mean that. We don't want to see a vampire movie and just have it be a remake of Dracula. There was a movie that was called Daybreakers, another Sam Neill movie. Ethan Hawke, Willem Dafoe. I loved Daybreakers. I thought it was a great spin on vampires. I thought it was fantastic. One of the greatest vampire movies I've ever seen. It's really good. It's nothing as classic as Dracula.
Of course.
But it's better than all the Dracula 3000.
I wanted to see it for a while. I just never got a chance.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good. I'd like to see more horror movies that keep you wondering, and it keeps you hungry for more.
Oh, yeah.
For horror fans, it's the thing of, I'm getting scared, I could die, but you displace. It's the same reason why you go on a roller coaster. It's an adrenaline rush.
A thrill.
There used to be a time when you could watch a horror movie and you could get something out of it.
For sure.
I want to see horror movies go back to where they're truly scary. And there's a difference between a horror movie, a gore movie, and a scary movie. A scary movie is something that pops out at you every 5 seconds. It's something that's designed to just...
the jumpy parts.
Scare you. A gore movie is Saw, it's Cabin Fever, it's Hostel, it's The Human Centipede, it's Audition, even though Audition was great. But a horror movie is that rare gem that
got horrors
plays.
in it.
Well, not even that. A horror movie is that rare moment that it takes the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being
Things that go
lost,
bump in the
the
night.
fear of being outnumbered, the fear of starvation. It's a fear, and it plays on it, or it creates a new one. Alfred Hitchcock did it with Psycho. Scared to go in the shower. Jaws did it. Scared to go in the water.
And although it wasn't a horror movie, and I know you didn't like it for whatever reason, but I did love the theme of fear that Nolan portrayed in Batman Begins. But go on.
I don't like Batman Begins. It was Nightmare on Elm Street was scared to go to sleep. Halloween was you were scared to move because the killer could be anywhere and you couldn't stop him. It was the theory of don't go in that room, don't go outside. But you didn't have to say that. It wasn't like a comedy thing back when horror movies were golden. It wasn't even common sense because it was something so new that you didn't have the horror rules that Scream were talking about. I want to see more movies that can play on those fears.
All right.
So, Internet, we hope you've enjoyed our discussion. We know we have enjoyed it. This is episode 1 of the Buzz Critics. I am Griffin Conway.
Yank, I'm Ricky Hyppa.
And we will see you next time.
Not the Phantom Menace either. Stay classy.